The diner smelled of fried food and coffee, a comforting scent that always made Daniel feel at ease after a long day of work, but tonight his mind was heavy as he sat across from his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, sharing fries from the same basket. Life as a single dad hadn't been simple since his wife's passing. He juggled double shifts at the factory, late bills, and the constant worry of whether he was doing enough for his little girl, but Lily's smile made every struggle feel worthwhile. She had his same brown eyes, curious and full of innocence, and it was those eyes that suddenly widened as she tugged on his sleeve and whispered in a voice filled with concern, "Daddy, why is she crying?" Daniel turned to see what she meant, and his chest tightened at the sight of a young woman at the counter, her shoulders shaking as she tried to hide her tears, while two men leaned in close, mocking her, laughing at her expense, their words sharp enough that other customers looked away rather than get involved. Daniel's instincts told him to stay out of it. He had promised himself after one too many fights in his younger days that he would avoid trouble for Lily's sake, but the sight of her frightened face, paired with his daughter's question, ignited something in him that couldn't be ignored. He rose from the booth, his presence tall and commanding, and crossed the room with steady steps until he stood between the woman and the men. His voice, calm but edged with steel, cut through their sneers, "She's not alone." The room grew quiet, tension crackling as the men exchanged looks, muttered curses, and finally decided it wasn't worth the fight, slamming bills on the counter before storming out. The woman's trembling eased only slightly, her lips parting as she whispered, "Thank you," her gratitude almost drowned by the pounding of Daniel's own heart. Before he could reply, Lily rushed over with a napkin, offering it with a small smile that melted the woman's defenses. She accepted it, dabbing at her tears, her eyes softening as they landed on the little girl who had noticed her pain when no one else had. Daniel guided her back to their booth, offering her a seat, and for a moment, the chaos of the diner faded into a quiet corner where three lives unexpectedly intersected. He didn't know her name yet, didn't know her story, and honestly didn't know why he had stepped in when it could have brought him more trouble than he needed, but as Lily leaned against his side and whispered, "She's happier now, Daddy," Daniel felt a strange certainty settle over him. He had no idea that this night, sparked by his daughter's innocent question, was the beginning of something that would alter the course of all their tomorrows. The woman's name was Emily, and though her voice was soft when she introduced herself, Daniel could hear the weight behind every syllable, as though speaking cost her energy she didn't have. After the incident at the diner, she had been reluctant to accept his offer of walking her home, but when Lily slipped her small hand into Emily's, smiling as if she'd already chosen to trust her, Emily finally nodded. The walk through the dimly lit streets was quiet except for Lily's bright chatter about school, her favorite cartoon, and how she wished she could have a dog, but even her innocence couldn't erase the tension etched into Emily's hunched shoulders. When they reached a crumbling apartment building at the far end of town, Emily stopped at the steps, fumbling with her keys as her hands shook, whispering another thank you before disappearing inside. Daniel stood for a moment, staring at the door that closed between them, a strange unease filling his chest. She seemed like a woman carrying far more than fear of a couple of men at a diner, and he couldn't shake the feeling that her story ran deeper. That night, after tucking Lily into bed, he lingered in her room longer than usual, his daughter's words replaying in his mind, "Daddy, I think she's lonely. Can we help her?" He had chuckled softly at first, brushing her hair from her forehead as she drifted off, but the question lingered like an echo, refusing to fade. He didn't have the luxury of helping strangers, his every penny and ounce of energy went into keeping a roof over their heads and food on the table, but still, the image of Emily's tear-streaked face haunted him. The next morning at the factory, his hands moved automatically over the machinery, his body used to the grueling rhythm of labor, but his mind wandered, caught between the grinding of gears and the memory of Emily clutching her bag like it was her last lifeline. He reminded himself that he had Lily to protect, that inviting trouble into their lives was dangerous, but deep down he knew there was more to Emily than what they had seen. Across town, Emily sat in her tiny apartment, staring at the peeling wallpaper and listening to the silence press in around her. The napkin Lily had given her lay folded neatly on the table, and for the first time in months, she felt a flicker of something she thought she'd lost, hope. That little girl's innocent kindness had cracked a wall she had built around herself, and though fear still gripped her, Emily made a quiet promise that she couldn't keep running forever. What Daniel didn't know, as he left his shift that evening with aching muscles and a tired smile for Lily, was that Emily had made a decision. She would see them again, and when she did, her truth would start to unravel, weaving their lives together in ways none of them could have imagined. The following evening, just as Daniel and Lily finished their simple dinner of pasta and bread, a soft, hesitant knock echoed against their small front door, and when Daniel opened it, his breath caught. There stood Emily, her hair damp from the drizzle outside, clutching a small worn-out bag, her eyes filled with both shame and desperation. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking, "I didn't know where else to go." She explained in halting words that her landlord had locked her out for falling behind on rent, that she had nowhere safe to spend the night, and as much as every instinct told Daniel to be cautious, he saw the faint tremble in her body, the exhaustion carved into her features, and before he could overthink, Lily ran forward and wrapped her arms around Emily's waist as if the choice had already been made. Daniel stepped aside, allowing her in, telling himself it would only be temporary, but deep down, he already knew he couldn't turn her away. That night, Emily sat at their small kitchen table, helping Lily with her homework, while Daniel washed dishes, his ears catching the sound of Lily's laughter mixing with Emily's softer chuckles, a sound that stirred something unfamiliar in his chest, warmth. Over the next days, Emily stayed, and though she apologized constantly for being a burden, she slipped naturally into their lives, cooking meals when Daniel came home late, tidying up, and reading bedtime stories that left Lily beaming. The house, once quiet and orderly, was suddenly alive again, filled with the kind of gentle chaos Daniel hadn't realized he missed. Yet beneath Emily's smile lingered shadows, and Daniel could sense that she carried a secret too heavy for her small frame. One evening, as they washed dishes side by side, the question escaped him before he could stop himself, "Emily, what are you running from?" For a long moment she froze, her hands submerged in the soapy water, then slowly she lifted her gaze, tears shimmering in her eyes as she confessed the truth she had buried, an abusive relationship she had barely escaped, nights spent hiding, always looking over her shoulder, never feeling safe. Daniel's fists clenched at the thought of someone hurting her, but more than anger, he felt a deep protective urge, one he hadn't felt since the days he promised his late wife he would always shield their daughter. Emily's voice broke as she admitted she had nowhere else to turn, that she was tired of running but too afraid to stand still, and in that moment, Lily padded into the kitchen, rubbing her sleepy eyes, and whispered, "You can stay with us forever, Emily." The words, innocent and unfiltered, cut through the heaviness like light through darkness, and as Emily pulled Lily into her arms, sobbing quietly against her small shoulder, Daniel realized the truth he had been resisting: Emily was no longer just a stranger. She was becoming family, and that terrified him almost as much as it gave him hope. Weeks passed in a blur, and what began as a desperate knock at Daniel's door soon blossomed into something none of them could have predicted. Emily was no longer just a guest but part of their everyday rhythm, waking early to make pancakes with Lily, helping Daniel patch up the leaky faucet, and filling the house with a gentle laughter that had been missing for years. Slowly, the shadows in her eyes faded as she found work at a small bookstore downtown, her love for stories shining as she arranged shelves and read aloud during children's hour, and each night she returned home with a brightness that Daniel hadn't thought possible when he first met her trembling at the diner. Lily adored her, always asking if our Emily could tuck her in, and Daniel couldn't deny that he, too, had grown used to the warmth of her presence, the way she hummed softly while cooking, the way she looked at Lily with such tenderness, and the way her gaze lingered on him when she thought he wasn't watching. One Saturday morning, while the three of them crowded into the kitchen, Lily mixing batter and getting more flour on her nose than in the bowl, Daniel caught Emily staring at him with a look that made his chest tighten, and when he raised an eyebrow in question, she spoke softly, her voice trembling but sure, "You didn't just save me that night, Daniel, you gave me a reason to believe in people again." The words hung heavy in the air, and for once, Daniel didn't brush them aside. Instead, he met her gaze, seeing in her not just the fragile stranger from that diner but a woman who had fought her way through pain and was slowly reclaiming joy. Before he could respond, Lily clapped her flour-covered hands and exclaimed, "See, Daddy. She was crying because she needed us, and now she's happy," and the simplicity of her truth struck him harder than any long speech ever could. The kitchen filled with laughter, the kind that comes from shared healing, and as Emily leaned against the counter, smiling through tears, Daniel realized that his life had shifted quietly, without him even noticing the exact moment it happened. What had started with his daughter's innocent question had led them here, 3 broken hearts mending together, building something whole. Tomorrow no longer felt like a looming uncertainty weighed down by bills, loneliness, and exhaustion. Instead, it felt like a promise, fragile yet full of hope. As he wrapped an arm around Lily and let Emily's hand slip into his, Daniel finally allowed himself to breathe deeply, to smile fully, and to believe that maybe, just maybe, love had found its way back into his life, not in the way he expected, but in the way he needed most.